now. Views from the Parc, an English podcast for all fans of Paris Saint-Germain. Join us for weekly deep dives and discussions pertaining to PSG, only on the PSG Connection.
All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, you guys sent us a video, a discussion between 3 PSG fans, and wow, they are fired up.
Yeah, they're really getting into it, especially since it's right after a match. It's like we get this totally unfiltered look at what real fans are thinking about, tactics and players, all that.
Absolutely. And right away, they start debating about Nuno Mendes, the left back. They're asking, should PSG let him attack more, like they do with Hakimi on the other side?
And that's like the million-dollar question, right? Because if Mendes pushes up, who covers for him? One of the fans, Sora, he makes a good point that none of the midfielders right now are like, say, Rodri, that anchor who can hold it down if both fullbacks are going wild.
He suggests maybe they could take turns. One fullback attacks, the other hangs back.
Yeah.
But then Loïc, another fan in the video, he throws out this pretty radical idea.
Yeah, have a midfielder drop back into defense and basically make it a back three when they need it.
Exactly. And he thinks, Mendes and Barcola on the left could be just as dangerous as Dembele and Hakimi on the right.
But here's the thing. We got to remember Luis Enrique, historically, he loves that 4-3-3. So is he even going to be willing to switch things up and try a back three? That's a big question mark.
That's a good point. And it's not just theory either. They bring up that match against Marseille where Mendes barely went forward, but one of the few times he did, boom, goal.
That moment really sums it up, doesn't it? It's all about that balance, that risk and reward.
Totally. And speaking of balance, they move on to the midfield, which, to be fair,
right,
looked really good against Marseille. Joao Neves especially. But, was that just because Marseille was having an off day? Or is this midfield the real deal?
Well, Sora is absolutely convinced that Marseille's midfield is overrated. He starts listing all these examples of their struggles and even says some players are just not satisfying. He didn't hold back.
It's like you can hear that rivalry coming through in his voice, which makes it even more fun to listen to.
Yeah.
Loïc, though, he's a bit more cautious. He agrees the midfield has potential, but he emphasizes, let's see them do it against a tough opponent, like a Champions League team with a strong 3-man midfield, and then we'll talk.
And that's a great takeaway for our listeners, too. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of one game, but you always have to keep the bigger picture in mind. One performance doesn't necessarily define a team.
Okay, so let's talk about Joao Neves. They spend a good chunk of time praising this guy. He's clearly generating a lot of buzz, and the big question is, where does he fit in?
Well, Loïc, he watched Neves a lot at Benfica and thinks he's a natural defensive midfielder. He even suggests he could be Verratti's successor, which is a big statement.
That's huge.
Yeah.
But Sora, he sees things totally differently. He thinks Neves is more of an advanced playmaker, highlighting his passing and how he links up the play. He even throws out these crazy comparisons like Raymond Kopa, even a future Ballon d'Or winner.
Wow, that's some serious hype. But it just goes to show Neves is a multi-talented player. And remember, at Benfica, he was already captaining their B team at just 19.
That's insane. So one fan sees him as the anchor, the other as the creator.
Yeah.
Two very different paths for a player who's already making waves.
And it really highlights how player development isn't always straightforward. So many factors come into play. Coaching, team dynamics, even just the pressure of expectations. It'll be fascinating to see how Neves navigates this next stage of his career.
All right, buckle up because now we're getting into some really divisive territory. Ousmane Dembele.
Yeah, he's the kind of player who really splits opinions. And these fans are no exception. They're debating, should PSG stick with him even though he's inconsistent? Or is it time to bring in some real competition?
So he's definitely in the bring on the competition camp. He doesn't hold back. He criticizes Dembele's decision-making, calls him wasteful. He even says players like Zegrova and Rafinha have been more consistent, even if they're not as flashy.
Loïc, though, he comes to Dembele's defense. He points out that Dembele attracts defenders, creates space for his teammates, wears down the opposition. He's not too worried about the finishing, says creating chances is valuable in itself.
True, but then they drop this bombshell. Dembele might not handle being benched well. Could cause some locker room drama.
Oh, that's a whole other layer to this. Team chemistry is fragile. You throw a big ego in there, things can get messy. It really makes you wonder, is Dembele's talent worth the potential risk?
Now let's zoom out a bit. One thing that keeps coming up is PSG's lack of a true number 9. They wonder if that's affecting how well Dembele can play-make.
Right. They start talking about this guy, Victor Gyökeres from Sporting Lisbon. They think he could be the solution. He's been dominant, even in the Champions League, and he's that classic, powerful striker.
Plus, there's this transfer drama because he has a 70 million shadow release clause, and apparently Manchester City is interested too.
Sounds like a bidding war could be brewing. And it ties back to that question of PSG's budget. How are they going to balance the books while also bringing in the players they need?
So we've got tactical debates, player evaluations, transfer rumors, even a little locker room drama.
And that's just the beginning. There's so much more to unpack in this discussion.
Well, you'll have to stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig deeper into these tactical nuances, explore alternative viewpoints, and see if we can find some common ground amid all this passionate debate. We're back, and man, these PSG fans are not holding back. Last time, we were talking about Victor Gyökeres as a possible answer to PSG's striker situation.
Yeah, they definitely seem to like him. Remember, we talked about his performance, that massive release clause, and how even Manchester City might be interested.
He sounds like he checks a lot of boxes. But even these fans admit that signing him won't be easy.
Right. There's always more to the story. We can't just look at a player's skills and say, done deal. You have to consider the money, what the manager wants, and how it could affect the whole team dynamic.
So, Gyökeres could change everything for PSG. But what if they can't get him? They mentioned some other options like Vlahovic and Isaac, but they didn't seem as excited about those guys.
It makes you think that maybe they really see Gyökeres as the perfect fit, the missing piece. But if that falls through, they'll need to have some backup plans.
Things take a bit of a turn when they start talking about Frenkie de Jong. I know he's been linked with PSG before, but these fans don't seem convinced.
This is where you really see how passionate they are. Sora, especially, he's really critical of de Jong. Questions his consistency, wonders if he's really made a difference since he went to Barcelona.
He even says de Jong hasn't had a truly great season since he was at Ajax. That's a pretty strong statement.
It is, but it just shows how everyone sees players differently. What one person might see as a weakness, someone else could see as potential.
Right. And we have to remember, these fans are watching the same games we are, but they're bringing their own biases and opinions, just like any fan would.
Exactly. And it's those different perspectives that make it so interesting to listen to them. It's like getting a glimpse into how different people view the game.
Speaking of perspectives, it's interesting how that win against Marseille seems to be influencing their analysis. That first half was pretty dominant.
Absolutely. Winning can make everything seem brighter. But a few losses in a row, and suddenly there's a sense of panic.
So is that first half against Marseille a sign of what's to come? Or was it a bit of a fluke?
Well, they're a bit divided on that. Louis, he acknowledges that PSG played well, but he also points out that Marseille was unusually weak, especially in the midfield. He's worried about whether PSG can keep up that level of play against a stronger team, like in the Champions League.
It's a fair point. You can't always judge a team based on one game, especially against a rival who might not have been at their best.
Exactly. Context is everything. And Louis' perspective is a good reminder to keep our expectations in check until we see how they perform against those top teams.
Sora, on the other hand, seems more willing to celebrate that victory and give PSG credit for their performance. He even defends Luis Enrique's decision to kind of ease off the gas in the second half, saying it was a smart move to save energy.
That's a really interesting interpretation. It shows how much faith he has in the manager and the team's direction.
So we have these two contrasting viewpoints. Louis, the cautious optimist, and Sora, the passionate believer. And honestly, both perspectives make sense.
That's what makes these fan discussions so interesting. They're raw, unfiltered, and full of different opinions. And it's up to us to listen, analyze, and maybe even form our own opinions.
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, where each piece represents a different take on the game. And as we gather more pieces, we get a clearer, more nuanced understanding of what's really going on.
Exactly. It's all about looking at things from multiple angles.
So we've talked about transfers, analyzed a key victory, and even explored how subjective player evaluations can be. What else is in store for us from these passionate fans?
They're not done with that Marseille match just yet. They're about to zoom in on some individual performances, and things are about to get really spicy.
I'm ready for it. Stay tuned, everyone, as we continue our deep dive into the world of PSG fandom. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive. And these PSG fans, they're still going strong. We've talked tactics, we've talked transfers, but now they're really getting into the nitty-gritty, breaking down specific players from that win against Marseille.
Yeah, it's like they can't get enough of Joao Neves. Remember all that praise? Now they're trying to figure out like where he fits best in this team.
It's one thing to say a player's good, but it's another to explain why and how he can get even better, right?
Right. Louis, he goes back to Neves' time at Benfica, where he was basically running the show from deep. He points out how many balls Neves recovered, which shows his defensive awareness, but then he also talks about his passing accuracy. Like, he can win the ball back and then, boom, start an attack.
So Lois sees him as that classic number 6, the one who controls the tempo, breaks up plays, and then launches those attacks.
Yeah.
But Sora, he's got a different idea, right?
Oh, yeah. He's seeing Neves as more of a box-to-box midfielder, someone who can contribute on both ends of the pitch. He even compares him to, like, a younger, more dynamic Verratti, which is saying something.
That's a huge comparison.
Yeah.
But Sora really believes it. He talks about Neves' energy, how he's always looking to get forward, make something happen in the attack. It's not just about stats for Sora. It's about that spark, you know?
And that's what makes this whole conversation so interesting. They're not just talking about like physical skills or tactics. They're getting into Neves's mentality, his leadership. Can he handle the pressure? They even start comparing him to other young stars like Bellingham and Rice, who are already playing at such a high level.
So both these fans, they think Neves could be a superstar for PSG, but they just have different ideas of how he gets there.
Exactly. And it shows how, there are so many different paths for a young player. Will Neves be that anchor in midfield, the one who orchestrates everything? Or will he be this dynamic force driving the team forward with his energy?
It's going to be exciting to see how it all plays out. But it's clear they see something special in this kid. Now, they don't just talk about Neves, they also spend some time on Vitinha, another young midfielder who, well, he's had his moments, but hasn't been super consistent.
Yeah, Vitinha is a tricky one. He's got all the technical skills. Dribbling, vision, passing, he can do it all. But there are questions about, like, his physicality. Can he handle the pressure? Can he make the right decisions when things get tough?
Some fans think he's a future star, others, not so much. It's like they're trying to solve a puzzle, you know? How do you unlock Vitinha's full potential? Where does he fit in best? They even bring up that Champions League game against Dortmund last season. He was one of the few bright spots for PSG that night.
It's like they're trying to give Luis Enrique some advice, right? Like, hey, here's how you get the best out of this kid. Do you think these fan debates could actually influence what a manager does?
Who knows? But I think managers, players, they do pay attention to what the fans are saying, especially when there's a lot of passion, a lot of, shared opinions.
It's a good reminder that football isn't just about what happens on the pitch. It's about the fans, the emotions, the debates, all of it.
We've gone from talking about tactics and formations to like really deep dives on individual players. And it's amazing how much we've learned just by listening to these fans.
Right. They're not professional analysts or anything, but they know their stuff. And their passion is infectious. It makes you want to get in on the conversation,
This whole deep dive has been a blast. From tactical dilemmas to player analyses to transfer rumors, all through the eyes of these passionate PSG fans.
And I hope it's made our listeners think a little differently about the game, maybe question some of their own assumptions, see things from a new perspective.
Football is all about opinions, and we want to encourage everyone to keep those conversations going. Debate with your friends, get involved, don't be afraid to share your thoughts, and most importantly, never lose that passion for the game.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. And remember, whether it's a match, a player, a tactical decision, there's always a story waiting to be told. So keep those conversations flowing, and we'll catch you next time.